So let's look at number 1. Find the area of a triangle that has a base of 6 and a height of 10. So what's the formula for area of a triangle? So the area is equal to 1/2 base times height. So what is our base? 6. What's our height? 10. So what is 1/2 times 6 times 10? 30. Do I have to put feet here?
Yes.
No, because the question's not giving me feet.
Did Ryan Hunter get to class?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
So 30. Find the perimeter. What's the formula for perimeter of a triangle?
A plus B plus C.
A plus B plus C. So what's A?
6x.
6x. What's B?
X plus 3.
X plus 3. And what's C? 11. So now we add all these up. So let's add the x's together. What's 6x plus x? 7x. And what is 3 plus 11? So 7x plus 14. That would be our perimeter. Find the area and circumference of the circle. So what is the formula for area of a circle?
Pi r squared.
Pi r squared. So we just multiply pi. What's the r? 5 feet squared. So we would have 25 pi feet squared. So remember, if it gives you feet in the question, you have to give feet in the answer. And since it's area, it's feet squared. So let's look at the circumference. What's formula for circumference of a circle?
Pi d.
Pi times d, or pi, 2 pi r. So we have 2 times pi times 5 feet. So the circumference is equal to 10 pi feet. Any questions on the first page? The quilt pattern includes 32 small triangles. Each has a base of 3 inches and a height of 1.5 inches. Find the amount of fabric used to make 32 triangles. So let's just focus on one triangle first. Okay, and it's asking us for the amount of fabric that it would make to cover that triangle. So what are we trying to find, the area or perimeter? Area. Because remember, the area, if we had a triangle, the area would be everything on the inside. So we need the amount of fabric it takes to cover. So the area is equal to, what's the formula for area of a triangle? 1/2 base times height. So what is the base of our triangle? 3 inches. And the height is 1.5. So what is 1/2 times 3 times 1.5? 2.25 inches squared. So remember, it's area, and it gives us inches in the question, so we have to give inches in our answer. But this is just one triangle. Our quilt pattern includes 32 small triangles. So what do we do to find the total amount? Alex?
2.25 times 32.
So we would do 2.25 times 32, which would be 72 inches squared. So that is the amount of fabric we need to use to make up the quilt. If K is the midpoint of HL, H has coordinates 1, -7, and K has coordinates of 9, 3. Find the coordinates of L. So K is our midpoint. So we know that the midpoint formula is the midpoint is equal to x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. H is the first point that they give us, this one. So 1 will be our x1 and -7 will be our y1. So we have 9, 3 is equal to, now we plug the 1 and -7 in, so we have 1 plus x2 over 2 and -7 plus y2 over 2. So now what do we do? So we set 9 equal to 1 plus x2 over 2. Because we have the coordinate for the x of the midpoint, which is 9, and then we have the equation for the midpoint, so we set them equal. So we have 9 is equal to 1 plus x2 over 2, and then we solve for x2. So we multiply both sides by 2. So we have 18 is equal to 1 plus x2 so now we subtract 1 from both sides, so we have 17 is equal to x2. So that is our x coordinate for L. Now we have to find the y1. So we would set 3 is equal to -7 plus y2 over 2. So we have 3 is equal to -7 plus y2 over 2. Multiply both sides by 2, so those cancel out. So we have 6 is equal to -7 plus y2. Add 7 to both sides, so it's 6 plus 7. 13 is equal to y2. So this would be our answer. That's the coordinate for L. 17, 3. Any questions on this one? Okay, so now let's look at number 2. Find the coordinates of the midpoint. So what equation would we use for this? The midpoint, because it's asking for the coordinates of the midpoint. So we have x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So what would our x1 be? -2. So let's call E our first point. So this will be x1 and y1. And F will be our second point. So we can call this x2 and y2. So we have x1 is -2. What's our x2? 5 over 2. And then what's our y1? 3. Plus our y2, which is -3 over 2. So what is -2 plus 5? So 3 over 2. And what is 3 plus -3, Ryan? 3, right here. 3 plus -3. 0. So what's 3 over 2? 1.5. You can leave it as 3 over 2 on the test. I don't care. Or it's 1.5. What is 0 divided by 2? 0. Any questions on that? So when it's asking for coordinates of the midpoint, you are going to give me a coordinate. When it's asking for length of the segment, you're going to give me one number that's the length. So what formula would we use for number 3? The distance formula, which is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So let's call A our first point. So this will be x1 and y1. And B is our second point, so we have x2 and y2. So now we have the distance is equal to the square root of, and now we just plug the numbers in. So we have x2, which is 6, minus x1, which is negative 2. That's squared, plus y2, which is 3, minus y1, 1 squared, so we have the distance is equal to the square root of, what is 6 minus negative 2? 8 squared, plus, what's 3 minus 1? 2 squared. So what's 8 squared? And what's 2 squared? So the distance is equal to the square root of 68. And you can just leave your answer like this. So when it's asking for the length, you're just going to give me one number, that's the length. If it's asking for the midpoint, you're going to give me coordinate point, so 2 numbers in the parentheses. Okay, last one. Find EF and GH, then determine if EF is congruent to GH. So we have this segment, EF and GH. EF and GH. So how would we find the length of EF and GH? What can we use? The distance formula. Or what else can we use to find the length of EF? Pythagorean Theorem. So we just did the distance formula, so let's do Pythagorean Theorem. So we would make a triangle, and then we would count how many sides, what is the length of each side. So what's the length of the bottom, this one? We would go 1, 2, 3. So this would be 3. What about the height? 4. So what's the Pythagorean Theorem? A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. So what is a squared? What's a? A is 4. What's b? 3. And that's equal to c squared, which c is our hypotenuse here. We don't know what c is yet. It is this hypotenuse. So what is 4 squared? And what's 3 squared? And that's equal to c squared. So what is 16 plus 9? So 25 is equal to c squared. Now we need the c all by itself. So we take the square root of both sides, so that cancels out. So we have the square root of 25 is equal to c. What's the square root of 25? 5. So 5 is equal to C. So this length here is equal to 5. Now let's look at GH. So we do the same thing. We form a triangle. And now we count how many units is the base. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we count how many units the height is. 1, 2, 3. So 3. So now we do the Pythagorean Theorem again. So we have 3 squared plus 4 squared is equal to C squared. What's 3 squared? What's 4 squared?
16.
And that's equal to C squared. So it's 9 plus 16. 25 is equal to C squared. So we take the square root of both sides. Square root of 25 is 5. Is equal to C. So this length here is our C, so that's equal to 5. So is EF congruent to GH? Yes. So we have the length of 5 and the length of 5. So those are congruent. So EF is congruent to GH. Let's look at number 1. A laboratory culture contains 150 bacteria. After 20 minutes, the culture contains 300 bacteria. After 1 hour, the culture contains 1,200 bacteria. Make a conjecture about the rate at which the bacteria increases. So when you're making a conjecture, you are stating a fact about the information that's given. Okay? So when we have these facts about bacteria, the conjecture that we would make would be every 20 minutes, the bacteria doubles. Well, my iPad is struggling today. Okay. Any questions on number 1? There can be more ways to reword this, but it's just you're stating a fact. When it says to make a conjecture, you're stating a fact, and it's saying about the rate at which the bacteria increases, so the fact has to be about the rate. I started on page 5. So the product of 2 even numbers is blank. So if we had 2 even numbers, what are we doing to them? We're multiplying because it's asking for the product. So what's 2 times 4? What if we had 6 and 8? What's 6 times 8?
48.
48? And what if we had 2 other even numbers, 10 and 12? 120. What do all of these numbers have in common? They're all even. So the product of 2 even numbers is even. If you know it's even, you can just say even. But if you need help finding that they're even, show you right. Kennedy is the youngest U.S. president to be inaugurated. Show that each conjecture is false by finding a counterexample. So is this true or false? Number 3. False. And what would be our counterexample? So this would be false, and our counterexample would be T. Roosevelt. Let's look at number 4. 3 points on a plane always form a triangle. Is this true or false?
False.
Why is it false? What would our counterexample be? So our counterexample would be collinear points. Remember, a counterexample could be a picture, a number, a statement, a name, anything. Something that proves the conjuncture to be false. So now let's look at 5. For any real number x, if x squared is greater than or equal to 1, then x is greater than or equal to 1. Is this true or false? False. Why is it false?
Because you can do 0.1.
So you're saying we could do a decimal?
Yeah.
So if we had 0.5, what is 0.5 squared? 0.25.
Yeah.
Is 0.25 greater than or equal to 1? No. So this doesn't prove the first part to be true. So we need something that proves the first part to be true, but the second part to be false.
-1.
So if we had -1, what's -1 squared? 1. Is 1 greater than or equal to 1? Yes. So the first part's true. What about the second? Is -1 greater than or equal to 1? So then the second part would be false. So our counterexample would be n is equal to -1. So when we're proving this to be false, the first part has to be true, the if, the hypothesis. Then the second part has to be false. What's another counterexample we could use for this? -2. We could use any negative number. Any questions on anything on this page? Find the next item in the pattern. What would the next number be? 21. Because we're adding 4 to each number. So 17 plus 4 would be 21. Identify the hypothesis and conclusion of the conditional statement. What would our hypothesis be? If you play the guitar. What about our conclusion? Then you are a musician. Remember, the hypothesis follows the if, and the conclusion follows the then. Well, if you were writing this, you could put the hypothesis is play the guitar. Because this is the main idea of the hypothesis. So if you just wanted to put this would be right. The hypothesis is to play the guitar. On a test, if you wanted to just underline the hypothesis and double underline the conclusion, you don't have to rewrite the whole thing. Just so you're clearly identifying which one's which. So write a conditional statement from the sentence, 2 angles that are complementary are acute. How would we write the conditional statement? Casey. So if 2 angles are complementary, then they are acute. So when you're writing a conditional statement, it has to have an if and it has to have a then. Now let's look at 3. Write the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the following conditional statements. So in the statement, if Brielle drives at exactly 30 miles per hour, then she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes. What would our hypothesis be? If Brielle drives exactly 30 miles per hour, what would our conclusion be?
That she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes.
Then she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes. So this would be our P, and the conclusion would be the Q. So if we're looking at the inverse, In terms of P and Q, what is the inverse?
Wait, let me check my thing. Sorry, no, I'll do it.
Not P then Q.
The inverse, we're just flipping them. So the inverse would be Q, then P. Guys, you need to know this for the test. So now when we're talking about Brielle's driving, how would we say the inverse? Casey.
I thought the converse was
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. The converse, Q then P. So ignore everything I just said. The converse is Q then P. So the first one that it's asking for is Q then P. So how do we say Q then P?
If she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes, then she drives.
So if she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes, then she drives exactly 30 miles per hour. Would this be true or false? Why is it true?
Isn't the rule that it has to be the same?
So when you have logically equivalent statements, the converse has the same truth value as the inverse. But we don't know what the truth value of the inverse is. We're just looking at the converse first. So is this true or false? Ton, why do you think it's false? If you're traveling 10 miles in 20 minutes, do you have to go exactly 30 miles per hour the whole time? No, right? You could hit a stoplight, slow down, go faster, speed up. So this would be false. So if she travels 10 miles in 20 minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean that she's going exactly 30 miles per hour. So the converse is false. So now let's look at the inverse. What's the inverse in terms of P and Q?
If not P, then not Q.
If not P, then not Q. So how would we say this in terms of Brielle's driving?
Brielle doesn't drive exactly 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If she doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes.
If Brielle doesn't drive exactly 30 miles per hour, then she doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes. So if Brielle doesn't drive exactly 30 miles per hour, then she doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes. Is this true or false? This would be false. Remember, because the converse and the inverse are logically equivalent statements, so if the converse is false, then the inverse is also false. So now let's look at the contrapositive. In terms of P and Q, what's the contrapositive?
If she doesn't travel 10 miles per hour, then she doesn't drive about 30 miles.
If she
So-
doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes.
Yeah, so if she doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes, so not Q, then Brielle does not drive exactly 30 miles per hour. So if she does not travel 10 miles in 20 minutes, then she does not drive 30 miles per hour. Is this true or false? So let's say she doesn't travel 10 miles in 20 minutes. So she's traveling 0 miles in 20 minutes, okay? She's not traveling 10 miles. Then she would not be driving 30 miles per hour. If she was going 0 miles, she's not driving 30 miles per hour. So then it would be true.
Can you tell from the
And you can also tell because the conditional statement is true, and the conditional statement and the contrapositive are logically equivalent statements. So if the first one's true, then the contrapositive is also true.
Is it like since those two are true, the other two have to be false?
No.
Okay.
All four of them could be true.
Okay.
All four of them could be false. But the contrapositive goes along with the conditional statement, and the converse goes along with the inverse.